explain to me a little bit more the significance in your mind of the quote about not just the questions, but who answers them?
Well, as I understood that, when I heard it, it evoked in me an idea that we are, in essence, somewhat subject to the people who respond to us in our effort to find out what we are curious about, want to learn about. And so in a sense we are going to take on the perspectives and the views of people who are answering the questions that we give, or that we were allowed to, or inspired to ask.
So, more mundanely put, educators have tremendous power.
That, I think, is the whole point. Education is enculturation. And it depends on the outcome of it, or the product of it, really depends on the underlying view and the motive of why you're doing what you're doing. If I could share a little analogy. I didn't have this experience myself, but I heard about it from someone else who went to the Smithsonian in Washington in the aerospace exhibit. There are two rockets. One is a original Gemini rocket, and the other was a German V1. If you look at both of them, you really can't tell the difference. They're both based on the same technology. In fact, both of them were developed by the same people. Yeah. But it goes a little deeper than just the appearances. The Gemini rocket, or the V1, was developed as a weapon to demoralize an entire population with terror death raining from the sky. The Gemini rocket was undertaken to invigorate the morale of an entire population, to believe that they could do something and go somewhere that was beyond their reach. Two totally different intentions and purposes, despite the fact that on the appearance they both kind of look the same. But it's the underlying purpose that determines really what's going on.
I was just thinking that I was going to talk next time about creation, because the talk last time I was here sort of led me to think about it as a continuation. And now you put that up, and that's pretty much the best way to introduce what we're going to be talking about next time, is the whole thing about the scientists versus the theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. But I was just, that's just an intro for next time. We should leave that up a moment. The other thing I was thinking of is, working on this definition of classic versus modern. And most of us in the church like to think that and all this, we're the classic ones. We have all it describes the new church and stuff. And yet, in many ways, we've fallen into that whole modern thing of trying to adapt the world to our thing, to our way of thinking. There's a storm coming, and we like to think, well, we should change that. We want it to be dry. We want it to go away. What can we do to fix this? How can we pray to change the circumstances that we're facing? That's a modernist view that we can impose our will on what surrounds us. We do that. Think, for example, of drought. There's a drought somewhere, and people will talk around and say, "Well, talk about the weather. Boy, I wish we had some rain. We really need some rain. We really need to get focused on. We should pray for rain." The classic view, which is expressed by the Navajo concept of poza, is, we're having a drought. We need to get used to dryness. This is the way the world is. Let's just adapt to it. And that's a more classical, here it is, this is the way the world's functioning. We're going to make ourselves part of the larger whole.
I think if I could just sort of take what you're saying and add a little bit to it, there's nothing necessarily that I see in the classical worldview that is anti-science or anti-progress or what have you. I mean, if you look at the classical world, and this point was raised in some of the original materials that I looked at, the Greeks loved science. The Maya loved science. The Egyptians loved science. They all had their, and probably a science that in some way is lost to us because we don't understand the complexities of it or the intentions behind it. But it wasn't the sole means of interpreting the world. It was a servant to other perspectives and understandings. Precisely. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing, like in one of the last talk I gave, like going several back when about the mind-body problem, is the Western view came from Descartes in his I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. When you could basically doubt anything, everything, but you can't doubt the fact that you have a mind because it's your mind that's doing the doubting. So therefore I think, therefore I am, right? But that means that the Western view that, and the scientific method came out of that and all that, but was predicated on intellectual doubt. Existence is predicated on doubting. So you have an inbuilt, embedded skepticism in the whole modernist Enlightenment tradition. It wasn't going to take long before that doubt would start doubting the very system that was supposed to magically dispel all that doubt. And modernity died because of that. We've gone into postmodernism right now. I think we're into it. And it's just my own opinion. I really don't really know enough about it to have an opinion anybody should care about, but I think postmodernism is a bag of junk. And it has no future because it doesn't satisfy anybody.
A thought I was having as you were speaking is that the rejection of the classic transcendent truth, the good, the true, and the beautiful, I think that was largely driven by the fact that a lot of what was held up, especially within the Christian world, as good and true and beautiful was increasingly obviously not to our what you might call common sense. That there was a sort of a bankruptcy there that was growing out of the decay of the Christian church. And it makes sense that that turned into skepticism and a rejection of that objectivity. And believing what I believe, I would say only with the revelation of the new truths and the new teachings of the new church is it possible to go back to a sense of moral objectivity in a way that isn't bankrupt.
Yeah, I in response to that, I would say that from what I get from the writings, Swedenborg was a scientist, and he encouraged people to observe nature. But from the manner in which he encouraged them, it was pretty clear to me that you could see divine meaning in nature, but you can't derive divine meaning from nature. You have to have revelation to expose what the meaning and purpose is in order to be able to see it in the physical world around you. And that it sort of ties in a little bit to the quote here, I think.
Revelation is the stick you use to clear the cobwebs, as it were.
I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
One thing that's key in the whole education, religious philosophy, purpose of life in the world is the statement that humans are born not for the sake of themselves, but for the sake of others. To me, that just encapsulates so much. And it defines the one point of view versus the other point of view.
Well, this is something that I struggled with a great deal, because I think growing up and being exposed to what I was exposed to and sort of walking down certain paths and so forth, I I really placed a high value on individual freedom. You know, it's inviolate. You can't touch it. People have the right to live in a free manner. In certain traditions, freedom is elevated to, a god. Liberty, this idea. But for me to come around and to the point where I understood that freedom is not an end, it's a means. And that really what is the vitality of spirituality is the interaction between people in a community. And that the essence really there is love. Freedom is important, and as I said, an indispensable prerequisite, but it's only a means, it's not an end.
Well, then isn't it kind of, when I was much younger, freedom always meant freedom from, responsibility, freedom from somebody else's rules. And as I got a little bit older, no, freedom provides an opportunity to do something. So it's freedom not from, but freedom to. And then it has to be well defined, and those ideas don't come from within. They're outside. They're objective.
They need to be taught.
They need to be taught.
And one of the things that Swedenborg teaches that sort of touches on that whole dichotomy of freedom is that he says, in order to be free, a man must be governed. And but the moment he senses he's governed, he thinks he's not free. And so there is that, a difficulty with the appearances of things. But
Isn't it kind of like,
well, I think psychologists talk about you go from dependence to independence to interdependence, and independence and freedom and my way or no way is a phase maybe we all have to, go through, but it's
For one,
not.
that's rational, if that's the right use.
Sorry.
It seems to me that, are we forgetting that the Christian church has fallen? And therefore, because of this, there is a great lack of morality that the Christian church used to teach. The numbers of people going to church has fallen tremendously. I mean, they speak of them as being gray-haired societies, etc. Well, the thing is, until the new truths start to emerge and become well-known, are we going to change very much? I don't think so. Because until we are able to perceive and know what the truth is, who are you to believe? You have to have a source of absolute truth. Now, we believe we have it, but a lot of people in the world today are very skeptical of that source. And until they feel the great need for absolute truth, we will mull around and stumble and have a difficult time, because we cannot do very much until we have something that we can look to and see that is true.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I think in many ways that's observable. But I suggest, I submit, and this is a thought that came from a foreign affairs and geopolitical analyst by the name of Jeffrey Copley. And he said, the fall of modernity has led to the end of the age of reason. And we are not in, the fall of modernity has led to the end of the age of reason. And we are not in an age of reason now. We are in an age of belief. And this is a lot of, and I suggest, is backlash to postmodernist ideals, because they don't supply any of the standard identity markers that people feel they need in order to be secure. what's globalism done for you? But what's happening, though, I mean, statistically, is churches that are teaching fundamental truths are actually growing. Small, 2-3%. Liberal churches, dying. Their populations and congregations are continuing to experience negative trends. But more fundamental evangelical churches are actually growing. People, I think, are becoming more and more interested in some kind of alternative. And, you know, the fact of the matter is they don't have to invent a classical model. It's already there. It's, you know, it's what essentially we came from. There are still echoes of it in our civilization. And I think you see it all around the world. It's happening. It's happening in Russia. It's happening in Poland. You know, it's happening in various places where civic nationalism is being attached to a return to traditional religion.
What Roger was talking about seemed very apropos with, just something came up. You were talking about, you know, the failure of Christian churches to a certain extent and the lack of exposure. And you were talking about also the failure of the postmodern era. And I was thinking to myself,
It hasn't
And
happened
it's-
yet, but I think it's coming.
I think it is too, and I think what has supplanted formal Christian religion to a large extent is that the source of belief has been education, and in particular higher education, in particular university level. And if you know, you sort of follow what's going on in the news with our universities and so on, there is a absolute rigid model of the way thought is supposed to be. These are the things that you think when you're in your university. This is what, and it's all imposed not by some objective standards such as the Ten Commandments. It's imposed by professors. It's imposed by student bodies. And I can see how it will probably, well, it's already getting rejected in a lot of places. You don't tell people how to think. There's that big brouhaha over the
Pronouns.
yeah, the pronouns. The professor that
Yeah.
refused to be subjected to being obliged to use these pronouns that somehow they get past the X and the Y chromosome thing and have 20 different genders now.
Well, if it's a social construct, you can go anywhere you want. I mean, there's here in Toronto, you can Google this, you know, man becomes girl. There's a 30-year-old man who identified as a 6-year-old girl. So he left his family and he lives with another set of elderly people who are his parents. And he dresses like a 6-year-old girl and he plays with dolls. But who's to say that's not who he is? Like, can I even say who he? I don't know. He thinks he's a 6-year-old girl, so he is. Because it's all subjective. It's all relative. And, you know, there is no objective standard to apply.
Illustration of that, religion professor at Bernathen College said he asked his students, if you've never played football, but you identify as a linebacker, are you a linebacker? And they said, yeah, if you identify as that. You've never touched a football.
Yeah, and these are students who are most likely the product of postmodernist education before they got to wherever they were going to be asked that question. But
Yeah.
We have another question.
Come on.
I just like to say that because our kids go to public school, the situation to me is serious, really serious. So postmodernist ideas is all over the place. Kids are encouraged to embrace define for themselves the identity. And there are certain concepts like globalization, diversity, equality,
The environment.
inclusiveness. They all sound wonderful, but they are the products of postmodern philosophies. Moral relativism. It's all over the place. And I have been having a very difficult time with Aryan. He has embraced postmodernistic viewpoint, and it's been a pain in the household. It's a very serious issue. So, and they are like wolves in sheep's clothing because they come sounding so wonderful. Who would object to inclusivity? Who would object to diversity? Who would object to being against racism? Well, everybody is against racism, but there is implication behind what they think, and it's a moral relativism where we are the masters and authors of what is right for us, and they defend their position by anybody who attacks the position as you are being offensive to me, and that shuts everything down. And so if you look at the list of what you put up regarding the postmodernistic ideas, they're very infantile. It's like infants who don't believe in the real world and are able to. It basically boils down to where the chaos reigns in life. So you can say, for example, traditional education is based on order, and modernist education is chaos. When things swing too far on both ends, it creates a huge chaos, and I can feel the effect in our household because of the public education. Public education is way down there. It's really bad when it comes to this. So I guess my point. I think there is a reason why there is a swing, because we used to have a traditional set of values, and as you said, it's order. There is always a limitation and structure around it. Something swung all the way to the chaos, and I think there is a tendency for us to think maybe intellectually conceited whenever we have a system with thoughts, and when there are too much order, because there could be a place where there is so much order that things become tyrannical, that becomes probably the force to bring people who are not quite in a channel of the order to think both ways, maybe push them too far, and you see the violence and so on. Maybe that happened, I do not know. And then people will start to think, well, we need to be compassionate and charitable to these people who have been offended or couldn't really fit into order. And now you have this group of people, and so one conceit of intellectualism send people, and then now people start to be compassionate, want to be compassionate, and now they become conceited of their own goodness. So behind the moral relativism is a very dangerous conceit of their own goodness. So they believe in their compassion so much so that anybody who opposes you in their view is evil, and that's when they use words like racist. You're racist, and they use quite a lot of that when people are not comfortable with that.
These would be the people, I think, that, or what you're describing is what Lewis called the conditioners. Their role in education is not to lead out or into.
They are leading people out to liberty. Well, they are not.
Or utopia.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sort of make you a slave to your own ego then?
Yep. But then the dangerous part is that we are not aware of that we are being enslaved to it, because we are intoxicated by our capacity to be good, and we sound good when we say, well, inclusivity, for example, diversity. That's a wonderful idea, especially in Toronto. That's huge marker. But there's a conceit of compassion that we are the agent that be able to do good. And of course, whenever people talk about it, we don't talk about good coming from something divine higher than ourselves. We attribute all the goodness to ourselves. So basically, it's a talk that we can talk about without any reference at all to the divine. So that philosophy is very much permeated in the public education system today. Yeah. I don't know if it's getting better or...
Well, things have changed over the decades. I saw Laura giving a speech at the Runnymede Club, and he said, in 1960, if you said, I have a dream that a man should be judged by the content of his character and not by the color of his skin, you would have been a radical. If you said that in 1990, you'd be a liberal. If you say it today, you're a racist. So things have changed, over a period of time that we can see. But I think that there will be a burgeoning renaissance that will maybe arise initially from a backlash, and it may have the ugly aspects of looking like a backlash. It may have the appearance of retreating out of fear into safety, as people return to traditional, more, identifiable and secure forums where they can live and their community and so forth. They're renewing their adherence and attachments to things like land and community and language and so forth, and tradition.
Yep.
And even race.
Yeah, and even race. And I think that, unfortunately, the collapse of postmodernism is either going to drive us into a kind of ethno-nationalism, where exactly what you're describing could happen. And in certain parts of the world that is happening. Or it could drive us into a civic nationalism, where...
The thing that's popping up, but I'm seeing it more and more often about saying, actually, from any point of view, there really is only one race, because we can all agree with each other and so forth. They're just people. It's one race.
Yeah.
That's sort of an upcoming meme. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's kind of fun.
But that's colorblindness. And we have
Yeah,
to
part of
accept that there is race, and that we have to accommodate ourselves to people and accept that they have rights as well as we have rights.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just saying, this is something I've been hearing more often lately.
Yes, but I think colorblindness is not a very good thing, because then we don't recognize that there are differences between us, and we're just looking at and saying, well, all of us are the same. Well, we're not all the same. White people have far more privilege than any other group in this world.
I think that sort of covers everything that I wanted to say tonight. And, as I say, a lot of it was not original. Some of it was. And, but, it was a journey for me to try and explore and toy with these ideas and, see how my own perception of things, is evolving. I can't pretend to assert that anything that I might have said has any real merit to it. What do I know? But it seemed to me that the points made did carry some water when I first heard them and tried to put them into my own words. So with that, I'll say thank you very much.